Hello and welcome to the Ham Radio Guy, and good afternoon. It's your host, Marvin, W0MET. Each week we're going to bring you the latest news, information, and education in the world of ham radio. Right here on the Ham Radio Guy podcast. I hope that you will hit that subscribe button for each week as we update it on Saturday mornings. And this week on our first episode, we're going to talk about the Parks on the Air system, how it developed, and a little bit of information as it's growing, and kind of, what it takes to get into it, and what once you get into it, what's the benefit, and talk about how much fun it really is. So we'll bring that right here to your first episode. And then also a little bit of news from amateur radio, American Radio Relay League. So stay tuned. Hello again. This is your host, Marvin, W0MET, also the Ham Radio Guy. We are bringing you the Parks on the Air information as our first episode. It's one of those things that I've really enjoyed getting out and doing. It's probably one of my favorite, activities. Besides field day itself each and every year. And so I want to kind of go back a little bit to 2016 and really talk about how the Parks on the Air system came. This all started back as a national program for the national parks for its 100-year anniversary system. And, it's, like I said, one of my favorite things to get out and do, besides field day, but it's really like having a field day each and every time you're out working at Parks in the Air. And, it's also a great public, opportunity to educate the public on what we do and what our capabilities are, and really get to know people, as well as just enjoy some nature and really get to explore some of the parks and beautiful areas of our country that we have out there to enjoy, and gets people out and about. And speaking of, I think I've looked at the Facebook page for the Parks on the Air system, and it has almost 10,000 members. So I'm sure there's a lot more than 10,000 members in the overall Parks on the Air system, but I can't find that number of how many registered users there are for the parksontheair.com website, or we also just call it POTA for short. The Parks on the Air system has just grown tremendously over the last few years from where it started out in 2016. And, the Parks on the Air system really has no affiliation with the Amateur Radio Relay League or any other particular organization on itself. It really is just a 501c3 organization that is ran by a bunch of volunteers made up of, amateur radio operators from around the country. And it's just a program, Parks on the Air, that encourages communications for portable operations from state, any provincial, national managed public wildlife, public lands, any WMAs. Something that's really come to a question I've had to ran across a couple times is the Army Corps of Engineers property sometimes, and that really does not fall into that qualification for Parks on the Air. Sometimes it's really close or maybe adjacent to some state or national wildlife management area, but the Army Corps of Engineers does not fall into that for one of the park designations. The Parks on the Air has a large set of references. I don't know how many total parks there are out there in the national system now, but it's only got a few rules that you really have to abide by when you're out there doing the activation. And really, there's two sides to an activation. It's you can be a hunter, you can be at home on your base station or your mobile, whatever you have, and you can listen for those activators that are out there in the parks working and trying to make as many contacts as possible. So there's really two sides to it. You can win awards on both sides, and we'll get into that just a little bit more in a few minutes. And so we'll talk a little bit more about, what is or who is Parks on the Air. Again, it's just a base of volunteers that coordinate the different call areas and the social media for it, and help develop the POTA app website now that exists out there. Kind of works on a mobile platform on an iPad or a mobile phone, or even a computer. And it's a great. They've really developed this year in 2021, and it's really got to be a really great app to have out there when you're in the parks and using that, or just when you want to look at your logs and your activations or your hunting, and even some of the awards. Again, we'll get to that in a few minutes, but it's got a lot of great information on the site now that you're able to see. So how does one really begin the Parks on the Air program, and what do you need to do that? One is just go to parksontheair.com, and you can register as a user on that site for free. And as you get in there, you can start to look at the maps. This is one of the first tabs you can look at. And you can see all the dots on the map, whether it's your location or state you want to visit and do some Parks on the Air while you're out on vacation. But you can see that there's lots of different parks in there. They usually all mostly begin with a K designation and then a 4-digit code after that. And it's really important that you keep that K hyphen and then the 4-digit code when you're using your park information, making notes in your log, or if you're putting it as part of your final file format when you're saving it, you need that K hyphen, park number designation in there. So it's just not K1844 or K1234. It is, actual the K hyphen in there. So always make sure you keep that as a point of reference too. What do you really need to activate the Parks on the Air? Amateur radio license, of course. Any type of radio would work, VHF, UHF, or just HF radio. Most people like to do the HF with 20 and 40 meters, but I've seen a lot of people going out there doing it on digital. Some people have tried the 2-meter side of it. There's certainly the opportunities, and many other bands are available to do that. And then any type of portable antenna, and there's the Chameleon, the Wolf River Coil. KM4 ACK has a great antenna out there for it. And, many other just dipoles that you can easily throw up. But those are the ones. Pactana does another one. But those are the more popular ones that we've seen and have used throughout the Parks in the Air experiences that I have gone out and done. And so, one thing about being out there is that you've got your radio, you've got your antenna. How are you going to power the radio now? So, creating some type of portable power or access to, some type of battery or solar panel that you can power that radio off of. And there's a ton of good ones out there that we can go in and talk about in future episodes. If you go out to YouTube, there's a number of great sites out there. Josh Naz with the Ham Radio Crash Course, KAMRID Radio, KM4 ACK. They all have done some great videos. I think even KB9 VBR has done some great videos on some solar panels and battery power. And typically it's taking like a Bino battery. Again, no sponsor of this show or anything else at this point, but any type of LiPo battery and lithium phosphate, and that will power up your radio. And I would probably recommend on something like that at least maybe a 12 to 20 amp hour. Gives you a little bit more time out there working and being an activator. So probably a 12 to 20 amp hour battery would be best for something like that. Again, we can talk about that a little bit more as we get into other episodes. But we put them in like a simple case from Harbor Freight, and put a couple plugs on the side and power pole connectors, and you're good to go. And then you're making all these contacts out there with your operations now you've got set up. How are you going to log that? So you can do pen and paper. Certainly always a great way to go. But the thing about the Parks on the Air is they require an ADIF format to be submitted to them for submission to their website to be uploaded. So really you need to look at some type of program for that. There's a new application out called Hammers, very popular, getting to be very well known, and it will certainly do that for you. N3FJP can do that. N1MM is another great software to do that. So certainly some opportunities there to make your decision and what you like best. Personally, I've been using N3FJP. Hammers is getting really big and growing. So certainly some options there to look at, though, as your choices you want to have. And then, just have a lot of fun while you're out there. And it is such a blast. I was out twice last weekend working, and until I got rained out on Sunday, and my battery died on Saturday. So, but I didn't have a solar panel charging anything at that point. So, but anyway, that's a little bit more about what you need for equipment. It's pretty simple, a pretty basic setup. A lot of the times I can just do it on the back of my tailgate in a lawn chair. So it doesn't take a lot to do it in the park. Pull up in a parking spot somewhere, back into it right on the edge of the grass or the sidewalk, and there you are working, setting up an antenna, and I'm up and operational in probably 10 minutes. So it's a really easy setup, a great way to get outside, and again, a great way to enjoy your parks. So, once you get out there then, and you've got all that set up, and it's like, well, how do I just, where do I start? So you can pretty much go to any frequency within your amateur radio license level, and start working a frequency there. And so you can start calling CQ, POTA, and then give your call sign in your park designation. But a great way to do that is really to get out onto that POTA.app website and spot yourself. And once you start spotting yourself a couple times, people, and you start calling and making some contacts, people will help you out. And if you just say, hey, can you go out to this website and spot me, if you don't have access to like a cell phone or any internet access at that point, just have the next contact go out there and ask if they can go in and spot you on the POTA website. And most people are very courteous and respectful of doing that, and can certainly do that, no problem at all. So that's certainly a good way to get your name out there onto the POTA app site, saying you're at this frequency and this band. And so again, have somebody go out and do that for you. So something about some advantages of being on the Parks on the Air program, being out in a park, quite often is even at my home here, the noise level floor with power lines and devices inside the house, and HVAC systems running in the neighborhood, get a lot of ground noise. And so you get out into those rural areas, get into those parks, and you typically find that you do have a lower noise floor. And, so that's an advantage of being out there and operating. And sometimes you can activate from a height of some point in a park. Sometimes you might run into some other constraints such as weather or accessibility of certain areas. But maybe not necessarily an advantage, but it can be sometimes if you get out the elevations and you get out into that park. We are out in the Cumberland Gap. I want to say late last fall, and my brother and I, W4 OPS, and we had a great height elevation level in that park, so we got out really well with that. So I mean, it certainly has some advantages. Again, that terrain can make a difference. So it's just an opportunity to test your radios and know that you keep them operational, keep your batteries charged, and so you can make Parks on the Air experience what you want of it. And I think just having, if you're getting out and taking a opportunity to get out once a month at least, for even a couple hours, it really helps make you a better operator and helps keep your skills sharp as an amateur radio operator. If you don't have an ability to have an HF station at home, it's another great way to get out into the parks for that. So, and you can just make DX, all across the country and outside of the United States. It's not uncommon for me when I'm out there doing my Parks in the Air is to cover the four corners of the U.S. So it's really incredible. And so, it's a great time. A couple of things is that, you're getting out, you're de-stressing, and you can kind of get away from, everyday life and people and the crowds and the city traffic and lights and streets, and really just can kind of enjoy your time out there. And so you can make the best of it in that park, and certainly kind of maybe take some time away from the radio and just go enjoy the park itself as well while you're there. It's always a great time to go do that. So, one of the quotes I've seen out there before was, POTA combines everything we love to do. You get the great outdoors, you're getting HF operations, you'll be able to set up your antennas. Again, it's that field day experience almost every month or every day you go out and do it. It's just, it's a great time to get out there. And I've just enjoyed it. So, all modes are usually welcome on HF. So if you're just a amateur radio operator that enjoys doing a lot of FT8 or JS8 call or FT4, PSK31, any of those different digital modes, or if you want to do just phone or CW, POTA welcomes all of those different modes, and you can certainly win awards, and you can see your statistics based on that. So it's a great logbook to see on that POTA website once you start uploading your files to see kind of where you've covered and what states you've been in, and what bands you've activated on and which modes you've activated. So. And once you start getting a few of those under your belt, you start to actually get some activation awards. And, these can be based on like a bronze or silver for having, a certain park references, like 10 unique park references, or making so many contacts in one park. There are, a number of, maybe so many QSOs from one park is what I was getting at a minute ago. Or you've done so many park-to-park activations, just meeting other park-to-parks contacts, QSOs, over the while you're out there activating. And so that will also give you additional points or awards for that. So, I would encourage you to get out and create that account at parksontheair.com, and certainly take a look at that and consider that. So, here's some other things to look at and consider for Parks on the Air. And, think about before you go out and do your park activation. What does that look like? Where do I want to go? So kind of what I started out is going to look at that first tab on the map and kind of see what parks are maybe near you and what's close and where do you want to go. What does that park have for challenges? Go out to that park website, usually under that state that has a list of parks, and you can find that information out there. What is that? Because you always have to work within the confines of the park that you're in. You can't just go sit on the edge of the road near the park or something like that. It doesn't work that way. You have to be inside the park itself. And you also have to, look at the, so not just being inside the footprint of the park itself, but also, making sure you're being courteous to and respectful of the park while you're there. So what type of footprint are you, putting down? Are you having an impact while you're there? That means whether you're, putting wires around a tree and taking off bark, or are you stomping through a bunch of weeds to reach out, to that tree to try and throw your weight up there to get that antenna over the branch? So there's lots of, ways that you can have an impact just going out there and doing the Parks on the Air activation. So, you gotta be very mindful of that as well. are you going to get out to that park and be able to operate from the back of your vehicle, or are you going to have a little table you're going to set up? Is this something you're going to have to pack up your stuff into a backpack of some sort, and are you going to have to hike a ways? So now you could consider what is your station setup and what you need to take with you going to look like. So depending on that park's terrain and how you're going to activate that park specifically. So, a lot of parks, of course, have a picnic table you might be able to operate at. So, or again, out of your back of your vehicle, a lot of people are going to the camps to do a campsite sometimes, and they will just use the campground station as part of their site and set something up, and that's where the verticals really come in. I think sometimes it makes it really nice. It's easier in a smaller confined space, and I've done excellent with my Wolf River coil. I've got an MFJ 213-inch whip on top of that, and it does phenomenal. But it's a small footprint. It doesn't take up a lot of room, and I don't have to worry about throwing a wire or a rope over a tree. So it makes setup and tear down really easy in that regards. So, but I really recommend researching your park, before you go out there and look at things, and know what that park, what its boundaries are, and that you'll be working within the footprint, or within the boundaries of that park while you're there. So, just a little bit to, get us started here. Again, you can have, that difficulty level of park activation that you want, or you can make it, a very high difficulty situation. So, how much of a risk are you willing to take? What do you need to do to make that work? Is it going to be the climbing and having to hike a ways, or is this a very easy and low difficulty where you're just backing into a parking spot and pulling out a table and setting up activation? So, I think as you do more and more of these each and every month, or every time you go out, you start to learn a little bit more about your equipment, your radio, how it operates, and really what equipment you need to take with you. So, you don't want to get out there and go, well, I forgot my power plug, or I forgot my, cable to go between the computer and the radio, the USB. And so you start to learn where to pack that up at and put that back every time, so you don't, forget it in a different box or a different spot. And so, you don't want to, have a failure to plan. So, it definitely takes a little bit of work to figure all that out and to be out there with it, and get yourself together. It might take a time or two for you to do that. So, but getting your gear ready, does that mean, having, your batteries charged, getting all your cables put together? Do you have a watch that has UTC time on it, or does your computer have UTC time? Do you have your, is your power plug, how are you going to power your computer if it dies after 2 hours? How is the battery on that? Do you have a backup log, with pen and paper? So, do you need a map of some sort of the park? Do you know what your grid square is when you go out there? Just double checking your gear to make sure you have everything, bringing, a spare cable or something. And, maybe, I've had this happen. Go out and have a coax that's 25 foot long, and one of my ends was bad. I happen to have a spare cable with me. I kept that as part of my gear to go with me just in case. I had an SL239 or a connection go bad in one of the cables, and I was able to replace that right there and keep activating without having to go home early. So, certainly things you can take into mind and think about as you are, getting your gear ready and making sure you have everything for that first activation, or, your repeated activations you have. Getting into the park, and setting up, again, we talked about, checking in with the ranger, minimizing your footprint while you're there. So make sure you check with them and ask that, visitor center, hey, I'm here with amateur radio. I'm an amateur radio operator, and I'm here to do some parks on the air. Is there any changes to conditions or, any limitations to where I can operate. And just, kind of describe what your setup is. And I guarantee that most of those park rangers out there may be a few that don't, but the majority of the parks, the state and local or national parks, apologies, is they're very familiar with the Parks in the Air program. And I've had them stop and talk to me a couple times and chat and, find out a little bit more about it. But they probably would want you to stay out of any overflow parking, or they might want you to stay out of like the campgrounds if you're not camping there. And you're sitting up in a shelter that may be reserved for an hour later or something. So they can let you know about those sort of things when you go out and check in with the ranger at the visitor center. So, or maybe just one of the guides there possibly. So, it's always a good thing. Again, we want to respect where we're at in our parks and always show our professionalism as we go out into these parks and set up with, the Parks on the Air program. So we want to continue to keep this something that we can go on and on with, again, as it continues to grow and more people become interested. It's a great, great program overall. So we want to make sure we always be respectful and courteous to those places we go. Other things you have to think about when you're setting up at your site now, once you've got set up, I should have mentioned this earlier, was safety. Is somebody going to come visit your site? I talked about the rangers coming and visiting. Are they going to trip over cables? Or are they going to walk into a really thin 26 gauge, wire, that you have, as part of your, sloping antenna on an end-fed half wave? Or does that be, some rope, just dangling left, that you've thrown over the tree? So, what are those things well visibly marked? Can they see them? You might have some stakes out there as well in the ground somewhere they might trip over. So can you take some flagging tape with you or put some traffic cones out there that might be really small, weight, some white, T-shirts that are ripped up, then you throw over your antenna just so they can kind of see that it's there. If it's really small, fine wire, or maybe it might be even towards closer to early morning or late in the evening, and it's getting a little darker. It's a little hard to see, and so you might be wrapping up and doing the late night shift, as we call it, the late shift on the Parks on the Air, and it's really dark out there. So do you have a flashlight or headgear that you can use to keep your hands free and use the headlamp and be able to pick up all your stuff? And do you forget that yellow stake, or green stake that you had holding down your antenna? So, just things to think about like that, your safety as well as others that might visit you, during that time. So, once you've got, your radio on the air, your safety protocols are all in place, what is that going to look like? It's one of those things where you just want to double check and make sure that you've got all your stuff in place as you start to make those contacts. Your logging software, your batteries, and everything are all good. And once you get there and set up, is everything running? And you have pencil and paper in case your computer just dies at the last minute. So then you can start making those exchanges. And again, Parks on the Air doesn't really have a formal exchange. It's really just about signal report, the call sign, and a location. So it could be W0MET and a 59 Tennessee. So that's all you really need from another hunter or another contact, a QSO that you make. Is those three things, and then you're submitting that in that ADI file, which I talked about earlier. Now, sometimes if you do like a park-to-park reference, you'll need the other person's park number. Again, that designator I spoke about earlier, that K dash, and then whatever that 4-digit number would be after that. So you want to make sure you record the other activator's park reference, because they want credit for that as well as you want credit for that park-to-park. And that's a script that runs in the background. Once you submit your file to the designated person for that zone that you're in, whether you're in a 4 zone or a 0 zone or a 7 zone, you submit to that person. And you can find them listed also on the POTA website. And then, they will upload those files, and a script runs out in the background that basically says, hey, they've got a park-to-park reference here, and they kind of see that, oh, it was you and whoever the other person was, and they can make that park-to-park credit, and they make that reference between each other. And so they know that that's good, and then, that will get added to your part of your awards and part of your statistics that you have for how many contacts you've made. So it's really important that you make that contact and make sure you give each person the credit for it. And that kind of goes along to be said that sometimes when you're working at park, you may be in park 1, 2, 3, 4, and while you're there, you're also able to work park 2, 3, 4, 5. So sometimes you get a 2 for 1, and you can have 2 parks while you're working in one location. And so at that point, you want to be able to, make sure you log both of those as individual contacts as part of that exchange. So you get credit for that 2 for 1. You're really getting a one-on-one contact for each park. And even though maybe the same person and they're in the same park, but they're actually in 2 parks at the same time, if that makes sense, which I hope it does. So make sure you log them individually as separate contacts with like a minute difference, so you can get that designation correct in there, and they can see that. It shows, it doesn't look like a duplicate entry necessarily. So just be careful of that and have that time frame difference, and that makes a difference. Once you get your contacts, you'll need a minimum of 10 to do that. And you can pack up and move on to the next park, or you can continue to make, more contacts than that if you want. But once you've kind of done with your day and you've wrapped it up, start breaking down your station. And, it's one of those things I talked about earlier. You're forgetting your cable, or you're forgetting your USB cable to connect your computer and radio together. Make sure you kind of put that back in the same spot. Wrap the cable together, whatever you do, so you know that you have it with you next time, and it's in that same spot versus looking for it and forgetting where it's at. And if you can put it back in the same spot every time, it makes it a lot easier when you want to go activate it the next time at the log. So, you want to keep your logs safe and have a lot of information on them, whether you've done a paper log or you want to make sure you go in and save that file. If it's an ADIF, if you're using one of those logging softwares we talked about earlier, and maybe copy your log to a USB drive for a backup just in case, because you want to make sure you have that. And you want to check for any left items behind, again, that ground stake or something, any feed lines you might have left behind you dropped, or, had thrown to the side because your other one wasn't working, whatever the case may be. Always remember that. So, after your activation, you're repairing any gear, processing your logs, and getting them submitted. And, really a couple hints just for maximizing your QSOs is that, make sure that you thank your QSOs as you, are out there making them. Always do a last call. And, if you, work a special event station or a 1x1 station, ask for the operator's personal call sign. That's what they're looking for on those type things. And then again, you might get a club call sometimes as well as your own call sign. So just make sure you get that personal call sign. And, biggest thing is have fun. And when you're done, you get home and you can format that log to an ADI file, get that thing submitted, and, you're good to go. So, there's a lot of, other things we could really look at covering, historic trails and scenic trails and whatever. But if you go out to that Parks on the Air website, there's a lot of resources out there you can actually look at and figure out and learn and read. And I would suggest if this is your first time getting into Parks on the Air, you just go read the Activator Guide or some of the other knowledge base stuff out there that will definitely answer a lot of the questions for you. And you'll find that as one of my resources that I've utilized today for this. So, we are getting out in the Parks on the Air quite often, as many times as I can a month. Usually it's once or twice, but we look forward to getting out as much as we can and having fun with it. And I would encourage you to try and get out every month and do it as well, and create that as a personal challenge, which I made it so far this year, 6 months, and I've got out at least once every time, if not more. Bring you more and more of those each and every week, different subjects that hopefully you'll find interesting. We're going to switch gears for just a minute and do some quick highlights of news that's occurring in the world of ham radio. The first major one everyone's probably heard about or seen in the news is the FCC investigating the Cuban government and jamming the ham radio bands in the 40-meter band area. A lot of ham operators down in Florida have complained that they have not been able to communicate with operators in the country since the anti-government protests have begun. And now the Federal Communications Commission is starting an investigation into this issue. And a Massachusetts court okays the amateur radio tower after the Zoning Board of Appeals in the city of Framingham, Massachusetts, erred in revoking a building permit for an 80-foot ham radio tower. The initial tower permit had been approved, and the city then went and revoked the permit, citing that the setback requirements for the city's wireless communication facilities bylaw, and it did not fit that, so they had to have the zoning requirements and the setbacks required for the construction of an amateur radio tower for amateur radio use, and the court ruled that it was not settled on the basis of like the PRB1, which you're all hopefully familiar with, considerations, but it was basically on the setback requirements should apply. And so PRB1 requires that local governments reasonably accommodate the amateur radio installations. And so he was able to get that tower constructed. Also, in other world news, amateur radio operators respond to the flooding in Western Europe in countries of Germany, Belgium, and Netherlands, where more than 120 lives are still remain unaccounted for. The Dutch Amateur Radio Service and the Belgian Emergency Amateur Radio Service coordinated their efforts in creating VHF links between emergency call centers in Brussels and the province of Hainaut. Also, they had other additional volunteers deployed in the region to help support communication for fire, ambulance stations, hospitals, and emergency vehicles, and command posts in Mons. So, again, amateur radio operators doing a great job across the world providing services, with the amateur radio emergency services. So, certainly reach out to the ARRL and look for a amateur radio emergency service group near you, and you may be called upon one day to also serve in such a need. So that is the end of the news that we have for this week. Always check out other podcasts like from ARRL, or go on to like the ARRL website and continue to look for other upcoming events, such as the Huntsville Ham Fest, just right around the corner, August 21st and 22nd at the Von Braun Center in Huntsville. We'll hopefully look forward to seeing you all there. I'm going to say 73 and have a great one from the Ham Radio Guy, W0MET.